Alright, welcome. Today we are going to do a video game console tier list thingy. If you are new to the channel, I make a lot of content like song reactions and my own songs and gaming streams and whatever fancies me at the time. I'm your crazy masked host, Skeem. Let's go ahead and get into this list now. I just found this tier list online. Some of this stuff I don't know what it is, so I'm just gonna skip by it. Just by these tiny pictures. Most of it I do, and I don't know what the hell kind of order they have this in. It's not in alphabetical order or timeline order. It's just all crazy nonsense. But whatever. Starting oddly with a portable console, the PlayStation Portable, PSP. This was not that good. It's C tier. Technologically, it was great, but it just wasn't fun. And you need to be fun for me to want to play or buy or whatever, and it was not fun at all. So C tier. The original Xbox. It was Halo. It was a Halo machine with a couple other games like the Chronicles of Riddick, but it was more of a proof of concept from Microsoft, and it revolutionized first-person shooters. But that was really all. So the Xbox, the original, for me is like a B tier. It was setting up for something great, but it didn't have much else to offer. This, I don't know what this is, a ColecoVision or something, so we're gonna drop it to the back because I don't know what it is by that tiny picture. I will say, as we get into this, all of these things are just my opinion, bro, so calm down. I have played pretty much all the consoles except for Atari that we're gonna talk about when they came out, as they were coming out, so my perspective is gonna be a lot to do with what was it like when this actually came out, rather than retelling the story, because I'm old enough, I was actually there. This is what we felt about it at the time, and this is how much I feel those things have reigned true after the fact. So that's the perspective I'm coming from, and when I'm ranking a console, it's not really on graphical power, it's about how fun it is and how good are the games, because graphics are fleeting, and next year the graphics are always better than last year, so who cares? PlayStation 3. Now, PlayStation 3 had a really rocky launch at like a $600 or $700 price tag for basically a Blu-ray player. It ended up with a really good library of games by the end of its life cycle. Like, it launched a lot of cool franchises, but it wasn't everything it should have been, so it's an A tier console. It's not S tier for me. I know a lot of people have PS3 in a very high spot. I don't know, considering it was around the same time as Xbox 360, it didn't stand out quite enough for me to be above A tier. Atari is trash. I'm sorry, it's trash. It almost ended home gaming with all its misguided releases like E.T. and crap. That was almost the end for gaming, was Atari. Like, no. Don't give fond memories to Atari. It wasn't fun. None of the games for Atari are fun. They all play like really bad arcade games, because that's what they were. No. Nintendo Switch is S tier, for sure. It's the only console that's come out in quite a while that feels like they cared about games and fun. And it works. It makes sense in today's world. I like that I can just play it wherever. It actually ports a lot of the mainstream games pretty well. Like, there's some down-res textures and stuff, but if you're playing it, especially in handheld mode, you're not even gonna notice it. I'm sold on the Switch. I think it's one of the best consoles to come out in a long time, and you could fight me on it. It's amazing. The Nintendo Gamecube. The strongest thing about the Gamecube are the games. It had fantastic games. Controller, questionable. Most games didn't play well on the controller besides Super Smash Bros. Melee, which set the entire franchise into motion where it is now, fixing a lot of what was wrong with the original Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 64. But you had Luigi's Mansion, you had the smaller titles that go unappreciated like Eternal Darkness. The GameCube was actually really fire when it came to what games it had, but it was hated on a lot because it didn't have a DVD player, which the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox were bringing to the table, so it had some issues in selling as well, but that didn't mean it wasn't as good. Where does it land for me? For me, it was really on par with the other consoles at the time, if not a little better. So since I have Xbox here, I think GameCube would be considered in my head better than where Xbox was at. It was more than a proof of concept, and the fact it didn't sell well really wasn't reflective of what it brought to the table, in my opinion. I think it was an A-tier console. I think this is a Sega handheld that came out. I don't necessarily remember. That's what it looks like from this picture, but if this is what I'm thinking of, it was good graphics and trash. It wasn't fun. Now we have the Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64 is remembered fondly by a lot of people because you had things like Ocarina of Time, you had Majora's Mask, 007 GoldenEye, Perfect Dark. This system was stacked with exclusive after exclusive. It was full to the brim, but man, was it expensive, and the controller was really wonky. I don't know what it is with Nintendo and a couple of these controllers, but it was really fun and a really good console with really, really good games. But it's not like S tier, it's an A tier console. It was good work, Nintendo 64. Now we have regular Nintendo, NES. I'm pretty sure, in a lot of ways, the NES is the GOAT just for saving the video game industry alone, if for no other reason. It invented everything, like the idea of the D-pad. You can't overstate what Nintendo did. I'm putting it in S tier for now, but we might bump that bad boy to the GOAT, the greatest of all time. This, I don't know what it is, so let's just throw it to the back of the line. Sega Saturn. Oh boy, technologically pretty cool, but that's C tier. It wasn't quite trash because there's a couple cool games for it, but there's a reason it flopped. Sega struggles sometimes with consoles and such. And you had this monstrosity. It's trash. Come on, guys. Get your shit together. No one's paying money for that. The Sony Playstation. We all know this is S tier, right? Is anyone gonna argue with that? This was the first true console for gamers. It just felt more like a hardcore gaming console than what we'd gotten before. We'd gotten family, fun, cool little video games from Nintendo, but I don't think we'd gotten anything that's like, you're gonna spend 100 hours in a week on this and live in your parents' basement. Sony started that, for better or for worse. Besides PC gaming, there was nothing like PlayStation-styled games, Metal Gear Solid franchise, and everything else that came from it. That's S tier. A lot of people, it's greatest of all time when you look at its library. I understand the contention. Dreamcast. Dreamcast was the wrong product at the wrong time. It was too advanced in some ways and too behind in others. It launched between console cycles. It was a mess, but this thing could hook up to the internet when that wasn't a thing. You could use your dial-up internet connection so Shimnu could update the weather real time. There was a screen in the controller for certain games that was interactive. The Sonic Adventure series launched on that, and that was great. There was the, that fighting game with the rocks, the stone whatever game. There was a lot of good things for the Sega Dreamcast. But at the end of the day, there wasn't enough good things, and that's one of the reasons it flopped. I have a soft spot for the Dreamcast, but it didn't live long enough to have a great library of games, and there was a lot wrong with that hardware, and it was loud, and it was not reliable. I want it to be better than it was, but it was just like the original Xbox. It had some cool things, but it was more of a proof of concept than a functioning console, and unfortunately, Sega never recovered from it. Then you have what looks like might be something that I don't know what it is, and Sega Genesis. The Sega Genesis is the peak of Sega consoles. It's as good as Sega ever got, and as good as Sega ever got was A tier. I don't think Sega ever made an S tier console. It is what it is. The original, the OG Game Boy, proof that handheld consoles could work, and not just that, but it worked really well, and it gave us Pokemon and all sorts of other crap. This is S tier all day. Way to go, Game freaking Boy. We love you, Game Boy. Props. Now, Xbox One. I'm gonna drag the PS4 over here too, because we need to talk to you, Sony and Microsoft. The Xbox One and the PS4 for me are both disasters. There's so much drama surrounding these consoles in the gaming community. Oh, Sony's the best. Oh no, Xbox is the great underdog. And blah, 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 blah. These two consoles are toxic because there's nothing fun about them. They're the most corporate shill consoles ever, and they don't bring anything to the table that make me not just wish I could play these games on my PC. There's something about the experience of playing the console that should make you want to play on that specific console, otherwise you're just a piece of hardware with some exclusives. And a lot of these other consoles in the past, including ones that Sony and Xbox made, either did something revolutionary or whatever else to make them interesting. Now, to Xbox's credit, they tried, but they did all the wrong things. They tried to introduce the Kinect, but then they were like a new version of the Kinect, but no, it has to be mandatory. They tried to make the whole thing like Minority Report style, where you waved your hands around to control it. All sorts of crap that they tried. None of it really worked. It was all very limiting. They were making it seem like you couldn't play used games, even though the concept of sharing games was better than being able to have used games, but it was just marketed terribly, and none of it really worked. But at least you tried, I guess, Xbox. PS4 didn't even try anything. They're like, there's sort of a button on our DualShock controller now, but since Microsoft screwed up so much, we'll just make ours cheaper and say you could play used games and ride that wave for an entire console generation. And that's what the fuck they did. And, oh man, there's some decent exclusives for both of these, but honestly, they're both pretty underwhelming for me. I almost have these, and in fact I do. These are both C tier. There's too much money whoring from these. They released the 4K upgrades in the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro. Nothing about it has ever made me want to play anything besides PC or old consoles that were better. It's been very disappointing. I don't like anything Microsoft or Sony has done in this console generation. It's not for me. Call me whatever you want, but as someone that just likes to game and enjoy games, they brought nothing of value to me with these. Then we get Virtual Boy, which is trash. The worst thing Nintendo's ever freaking done. Enough said. PC. I don't know why there's a PC on here. We're talking about consoles. I've talked about PC gaming, but I'm not ranking a PC when we're talking consoles. It's different. The Wii U. The Wii U is also C tier. It was confusing as to what it was. It was a proof of concept for the Switch, so thanks for that. But on its own, it had some decent games, but the controller was annoying. It ran out of batteries too fast. It was required for things when it was frustrating. There's a lot wrong with the Wii U. Props on the backwards compatibility, but everything else, Thankfully, it gave us the Switch eventually, but it was not ready. It was marketed bad, and it was bad. Super Nintendo, the SNES. I have a soft spot for Super Nintendo. It's probably the console that I've had some of the most fun on, but just because of its frame rate issues and stuff alone, it's just A tier for me. It had that nice battle with Sega Genesis back in the early 90s. Those were the two that were duking it out. The Super Nintendo came out on top in its overall game library, but the Sega was probably a better console overall as far as reliability and graphic performance and some of the diversity of its library, but they're both A tier. They're both good. Now, the Nintendo 3DS, on the other hand, was S tier. That's the last true handheld console, I'm pretty sure. I don't think anyone else is going to release one. Mobile phones and tablets have kind of killed that, and Nintendo switched to the Switch. Switched to the Switch for their mobile gaming alternative. So rest in peace, handheld gaming as we once knew it, but the 3DS had it go out with a bang. That thing lasted forever, had a bunch of cool little updates. The library for that's insane. Buy yourself a 3DS or a 2DS if you don't like the 3D thing. You need one. You need to play those 3DS games. They're amazing. So much going on for the 3DS. S tier for sure. Game Boy Advance, that was just a Game Boy with a pretty good graphics upgrade bump. It was kind of B tier. A lot of people loved the Advance and the SP and all that, but for me it was just felt like it wasn't quite where it needed to be, but it was really fun, and I had a lot of fun on my Game Boy Advance. I just don't hold it in as high as regard of the original Game Boy or the Game Boy Color or the DS or the 3DS. It's just kind of there for me. The Nintendo Wii. Nintendo Wii gets a lot of hate because it was not for gamers. But the Nintendo Wii was dope as hell. You can't tell me you didn't spend like 10 or 20 hours like a day, like half of your day or your full day on Wii Sports, trying to get a perfect 300 on bowling or trying to own your friend in doubles in tennis. Now, the Wii was lit. It sold like it should have. It is S tier. Screw you who are like, yeah, but it wasn't true for gamers. It didn't have HD and can't. Screw you. It was fun as hell. And Mario Galaxy and Mario Galaxy 2 are still some of the best Mario games to ever come out, and they look gorgeous to this day on that system that everyone rips on for having no technological power, because Nintendo understands you don't go for realism, you go for art. Enough said. Psp Vita is the best thing that Sony did in a handheld, and it was still C tier. It like, whenever I played this, I was like, this is great graphics, but Sony never really connected on understanding what makes a handheld fun. They just knew how to make it look good, and it was expensive, and I just never saw a reason to enjoy it. Xbox 360, that's an S tier. I know I've got a lot in the S tier, but let's be honest here. Online gaming doesn't exist as it exists now without the Xbox 360. The Xbox 360 controller figured out how to do first-person shooter correctly on console without a mouse and a keyboard. PlayStation's DualShock still doesn't feel right for first-person shooters. Nobody's lining up to buy a DualShock style controller to plug into their PC to play first-person shooters, okay? But they will buy an Xbox One. It's just common sense. It's a better controller for first-person shooter. To be fair, Sony usually focuses on third-person titles for most of their exclusives, whereas Xbox is focused on first-person, so it makes sense that that's how the controllers are designed. But just the idea, the foresight to charge people for Xbox Live, even though people got really mad, but then they actually were able to do online gaming as good as you experienced on your PC, and the PlayStation 3 never was able to. It won between the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. It was better. It was just better, even without the Blu-ray player. PS2, obviously S tier as well. That library of games just can't get touched. Maybe it's the greatest of all time. I don't know. I know I've got a lot of S tier here, but let's be honest, we've been given a lot of really great consoles by a lot of good developers and also a lot of bad ones. Nintendo DS was A tier for me. It was definitely a step up from the Game Boy Advance, but it wasn't like as amazing to me as the 3DS, but it did show, hey, we could have like Nintendo 64 games on a DS, and the Mario 64 remake for the DS was beautiful. That's the list, so now I have to choose the GOAT. What is the greatest of all time? Alright, I'm gonna knock out the ones that I don't consider the greatest. I don't think the PlayStation 2 or the Xbox 360 are the greatest of all time. I don't think the Wii is the greatest of all time, nor is the 3DS, nor is the Game Boy. The Switch is still current, but damn if it doesn't make a case for the greatest of all time. And the Nintendo, the case is obvious. It saved video games, and the PlayStation created gamers without a PC. Here is where I am torn, so you can understand my thought. I'm pretty much between Nintendo and Sony only because Switch hasn't finished out its life cycle, so I don't want to judge it as the greatest of all time when it hasn't even finished out its life cycle. So by default, it leaves me with these two. So I think I'd want to play a PlayStation maybe more, but then I'm thinking Super Mario and Super Mario 3 and Super Mario 2 and Duck Hunt, so maybe I would want to play Nintendo more than the Crash Bandicoots and Metal Gears of Sony. I'm just gonna bite the bullet and put it at the NES, because none of these other things exist without the NES, so I'm comfortable putting it as the greatest of all time. So that is my tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You can, give me a hate for these ColecoVision or whatever I left down here that you think is the greatest console of all time for some whatever reason. I don't care. Until next time. Oh, wait. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, check out the other videos on the channel. Until next time, I scheme, you scheme, we all scheme for ice cream. Bye!